money than winning. And I said, well, I would say that they're right neck and neck in those two things. I said, what you have to understand, though, is that winning makes him more money.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
If he doesn't win, he's not going to make money.
Yeah.
Or not going to make as much money.
Yeah.
So, of course he wants to win. I mean,
I agree.
And then I think he wants to win just because I've been around Jerry enough to see
Hello,
it.
folks.
He gets
Welcome to
emotional.
the Rotary Club
yeah.
of Park Cities. I am Barb Jeffries, this year's club president.
He can't
This
separate
is our
himself.
23rd meeting of the year.
Yeah.
We have had just a wonderful experience. We have been so fortunate to be here in SyncLab Studios,
Yeah.
which Mark Neese, one of our club members,
He does not want to be
helps us with these meetings every week.
You know?
You'll notice we have our new banner
Do you
behind
really
us here.
believe that
right
what
now
happened?
you're seeing it
I mean,
virtually,
you hear it all the
but
time. but
it's a
when
new
Jenny
look, the new brand new design based
think
on
you got the credit for what
RI branding requirements.
Hope
And
that part.
the actual banner, which is beautiful, is
That
now done.
he did
and
not
ready
get the
to
credit
be
he was hoping
hung
he'd
at
get.
Maggiano's, and once
Oh,
we're
Jerry.
able to get back to meeting in person again, hopefully March, maybe April, but we'll wait and make sure until it's absolutely a safe time for everyone to be gathered together again. So until then, we will continue in this
playing back
wonderful
already.
studio. I want to remind you, well, actually, let me ring the bell again, start this meeting. I would like to remind you to let me know if you have any joys or concerns. Please let me know in advance, and we will mention them. I do want to bring Linda Tunnell up today. She is, today is the anniversary of Ray's passing, and I know that she loves her Rotary family, and her Rotary family loves her. So, Linda, you're in our thoughts and prayers today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to past President Pam Carvey. She's going to do the invocation followed by the pledge.
As we pause to remember the unrest in our nation's capital last week, and as we reflect on the upcoming presidential inauguration, let us bow our heads and pray together. Lord God, you are the builder of all things. May our leaders work together harmoniously and not get sidetracked by partisan politics. Help our leaders and help us not to be divided, but to commit to working cooperatively for the common good. Give our leaders and us humility and respect for one another. When our leaders have different opinions and agendas, help them to find common ground and to find ways to compromise. Help our leaders to be mutually supportive of one another. We are thankful for this day that you have given us, for our blessings, our opportunities, our challenges. May we appreciate and use each day that comes to us. We pray for strength and guidance for each day as it comes, for each day's duties, each day's problems. May we be challenged to give our best always, and may we be assured of your presence with us. Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in
Okay, my name's Shawn Foster. I want to give you the PCR Marketplace Advertiser is Nolan Duck. Nolan joined this club in 2006. He is a Paul Harris Fellow, and he has been a Rotarian for 30 years. He's married to Nancy, and in 2005, he founded the DBG Advisors, which is an M&A advisory firm and business brokerage firm. He focuses on helping business owners determine, build, and get full value of their business when they exit. Nolan provides guidance to business owners who are looking to increase the value of their business to ensure a lucrative exit. His goal is to help owners be prepared to sell if someone comes calling. His firm guides business owners through both the exit planning process and the actual sale of their company. Nolan has written a book which is called Are You Ready to Sell Your Business? And it addresses 10 critical issues for every business owner must address to get their business on the right track for a lucrative exit. Now, Nolan's also a practicing minister and has knowledge and experience to earn his place as a trusted business growth exit advisor. So please join me.
Thank you, Pam and Ian, for that. Ian, that rendition of our national anthem is just spectacular. And Shawn, appreciate you giving us our Marketplace Advertiser Spotlight today. I appreciate having the members help me as we run these meetings each week. I have just a few announcements before we get to a new member speech, which is always one of our favorite things, and then we'll get to our great program today. The first announcement is Happy Franklin, your president-elect, will be conducting her strategic planning session on February 6th. So I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be time well spent. It sets the course for where their club is going to go in the next year. So your input is very important during that day. We have some wonderful speakers coming up as we continue into January. We've got, next week is our Ranger Day. Everyone loves Rangers. Eric Nadell, as you know, the announcer, has been with them for years and years, will be here in the studio with their new general manager, Chris Young. So that's going to be a wonderful program. I really look forward to that. I encourage you to think about questions you have for these two gentlemen in advance. I will be asking for them in my Monday morning water cooler email. And if you'll reply to me, the first 10 members who reply with a question for these guest speakers for the Rangers program will be getting a Rangers mask. So be thinking about your questions and be ready to hit respond as soon as you get my Monday morning water cooler email. The next week, the January 29th, will be Dan Henry. He is the Fox 4 Channel 4 meteorologist and has written a book about Texas weather. We all live it and see it, and today blow in it. So it'll be fun to hear what he has to say about the weather program, about the weather here in Texas, particularly our recent tornado. Next up, I'm really excited to hear about Eric Harrison. He pre-recorded his new member speech. He has just joined the club, and his sponsor is Jeff Shehan. So when Eric is done, you will see our Jeff Shehan, who is the program chair of the day. He's filling in for Linda Tunnell today. And Kevin Sherrington with the Dallas Morning News sports writer. They will be on set to wrap up the program. Well, this is it for me, so have a great weekend, and let's hear what Eric has to say, and then we'll hear our program today. Thank you, folks.
Hi there, I am Eric Harrison. I was actually born and raised in Dallas. Grew up in the Carrollton Farmers Branch area, graduated from R.L. Turner High School a few years ago. Proud graduate of the University of Oklahoma, and have been a season ticket holder since the year I graduated, so I don't miss many games there. My wife Jennifer and I have been married for 31 years plus. We have 3 grown children. My oldest son is 24. He just shipped out to go to Florence, Italy for a year on a graduate art history program. So it's good to be my oldest son for sure. I also have a 22-year-old son and a 21-year-old daughter who is at SMU. I spent my entire career working in my family business, which was a wholesale women's shoe company based here
Yes, sir.
in Carrollton.
Oh, is that
Januray
right?
shoes for some of you,
You know, it's such a
ladies
big
that
church. I
may
grew up in Houston.
be
church of about 150
shoeaholics
people.
and have heard of us.
Really?
We
So it's a
are
little different.
still a
Come to
family-owned and
Dallas and
operated
being a member
local
of a church that's
company,
so
but
huge.
I
It's hard to see the
decided
same
at the
people from one
beginning
Sunday to the
of
next.
2019
Sometimes.
So where did you grow up in Houston? I grew up in Houston. I went to Westchester.
that
which
I
is-
was
Did you? I
ready
grew up in,
to do
close to
something
Pasadena.
else.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Really
Yeah, oh,
just
huge.
not having any
Powerhouse.
idea what
Yeah,
I was
it was
doing
back
or
then.
why.
It was.
It just seemed like the
it
right
was-
thing to do. So I met with my brother, who was my business partner, and we had a very amicable split. He bought me out, and since then, at that time, I started. The first thing I did is I wrote and self-published my first book called Mustard Seed Faith, which is available on Amazon if you're so inclined. I also do a fair bit of speaking, both online mostly at this point and to groups. So I certainly am comfortable on the stage. And the primary focus of what I'm doing right now is coaching. May of last year, I became a licensed, certified Ziegler coaching system coach. So I am taking the principles and wisdom for almost 50 years that the Ziegler Corporation has been imparting to millions of people all over the world. And I work one-on-one or in small groups with people to just help them really discover, what their dreams and goals are and where they are now and how to bridge the gap from where they are to where they want to go. And so specifically, I work with a lot of, actually, as it turns out, business owners, since I was one myself, but I also work with people who are up and coming and looking to advance their careers. So I have taken on somewhat of a mentor role, and that's really what led me to the Rotary Club, is just the whole thing of service. I just want to serve in this, second phase of my life, as it were. I just want to get involved in Rotary. I want to be involved in some of the projects that you're doing. I'm especially interested in the Bonton project we have going on. I'm especially interested in the leadership program that I think you offer, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot more. The only thing I have to learn is what I don't know right now, which is a lot more than what I do know. But I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to meet all of you, and I can't wait till we can all get together again in person and break bread together. But I'm excited to be part of the Park Cities Rotary Club. I specifically sought you out because I wanted the most active, most involved, most energetic group, and I believe I found that with you. So look forward to meeting you soon. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Park Cities Rotary Club, and today we're honored to have Kevin Sherrington with the Dallas Morning News, and I'm sure many of you know who Kevin is, but he is one of the lead writers for the sports section of the Dallas Morning News. And so Kevin's bio reads as, Kevin has been a sports columnist for 20 years in the Dallas Morning News, his fifth Texas newspaper, and he hopes his last. In more than 40 years as a sports writer, he has covered 9 Olympics, 6 Super Bowls, 5 World Series, 6 Final Fours, 2 Masters, 2 NBA Finals, and a Stanley Cup, the Daytona and Indy 500s. The World Eskimo Indian Olympics and the Texas Water Safari, the world's longest canoe race, just to name a few. His work has been included in the Best American Sports Writing and Best American Newspaper Writing anthologies. He's twice been named one of America's top 10 sports columnists, and 5 times has been voted Texas Sports Writer of the Year by his peers. A Dallas native, he grew up in Houston and graduated from the University of Houston. His wife, Debbie, a Dallas realtor, are the parents of 4 children, Jake, Madeline, Ford, and Olivia, and Kevin and Debbie are expecting their first grandchild any day. So please welcome Kevin Sherrington.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Kevin, obviously, right now, and a lot of your writings have been revolving around the Dallas Cowboys, and I could go on, and we all could, about just commentary to that. But as I mentioned earlier, on Wednesday you wrote a column about grading the Cowboys this last season, and you basically quoted Dean Wormer from Animal House and when giving grades to all his pupils. And you obviously have some comments to that, but kind of give us your thoughts to where we are with the Cowboys and where they need to be going. And clearly, I'm sure you can espouse on this for a good while.
You know, that's one of the great things about being a sports writer in Dallas is that Jerry Jones always gives you something to write about, good or bad. Mostly bad lately, but anyway, it is always a constant topic. Here you could always talk about the Cowboys. Dale Hansen once said he could lead with the Cowboys 365 days a year, and he pretty much did. So it is good to know that you can do that. Over the years, I've written about a lot of these coaches along the way. I did want to talk about that history a little bit because it's interesting. When I came to Dallas in 1985, Tom Landry was still the coach. I didn't deal with Tom very much then because I was writing about colleges and baseball and boxing, actually. And so most of my interaction with Tom came after he'd retired or after he'd been retired by Jerry Jones. And usually it was by you could just call him on the telephone. His number was in the phone book. I don't know how many people remember phone books, but he was listed. You can just call him up and talk to him. He was a very nice guy to deal with, and I enjoyed that. The history of the Cowboys since the coaches have been some interesting, some not so interesting. They've been all different types along the way. Jimmy Johnson, certainly the second best coach in Cowboys history behind Tom Landry, I think. And the kind of guy that was a little more difficult to deal with. Jimmy wasn't always happy with me when I wrote about him. I remember once I went to Miami to do a story on him after he had left the Cowboys and had taken up coaching the Dolphins, and the Cowboys were about to play the Dolphins the next week. So I went there to do this story, and so Jimmy was pretty affable about the whole thing, or at least amenable to it.
Sure.
And then over the course of the conversation, he didn't like the questions. And at one point, he got up and left the room and then came back and had me thrown out of the Dolphins facilities. So it was a little unusual to have that happen. That never happened to me before, you know. And so, as a matter of fact, he called my boss and threatened that if I showed up at the press conference the following Monday or at the game, that he would not speak at the press conference. So I thought about showing up with one of those fake glasses in the noses, you know, but I decided against it the last minute.
Did you ever find out what specific?
Oh, he thought I was part of a plot against him that Jerry and Barry Switzer had hatched, you know, and there was no such thing, you know. Nobody was used psychological ploys nearly as much as Jimmy did, and Jimmy was mad when he thought that somebody else was using those against him. So it was pretty funny. We enjoyed it. He even wrote about it in his book that when he was with the Dolphins. So it was. We eventually patched that all up, and everything's fine now. Jimmy's a lot different guy now than he was back then. Back then, you know, football always came first with him. He's more of a family guy now. Now that he's established his reputation and gotten his Hall of Fame bust, so he's happy with all of that, and I think he's happy with his life, and that's a good thing too, you know.
Yeah, I know he's fishing a lot and enjoying his time on the
in the Keys. Yeah, he's doing a great job down there. You know, and one of the things about writing about football or baseball or any kind of sports is that, you know, people get the idea that sports writers really care whether the teams win or lose, and certainly that's a factor in what we do. But as the great Frank Luxa once said to me, and as we were talking about Barry Switzer, he says, "I don't care if he's a good coach or not. I care that he's interesting." And I think that everybody would have to agree, no matter what you think about Barry Switzer, he was interesting. He is interesting. He's one of the, first of all, he's a lot smarter than you think he is. He has unbelievable recall. You can ask him about any game, any time. He can tell you the dates and when it happened and what happened and the particulars of all of it. I can't remember breakfast. So it's really impressive to me what he can do. And I enjoyed working with Barry and writing about him. And I remember once I went in and did a story about his life, and it's a very interesting life. And of course, he wrote the book Bootlegger's Boy about growing up the son of a bootlegger, and told stories about all of that. And as he was telling these stories there with his brother Donnie, who is his complete opposite. Donnie's educated at Duke. He's a lawyer. He's as different from Barry as you could possibly imagine two brothers could be. And yet they were, as I'm interviewing them, they're asking each other questions about things that had happened in their youth and the very unfortunate things that happened, including the death of his mother when she killed herself. And Barry talking about that, the moments leading up to that, when he thought that he had actually been responsible for it because she come in to kiss him goodnight, she was drunk, and he said that he told her, I'd rather never see you again than to see you like this. And then he walked outside and heard her shoot herself. So to grow up with those kind of things, you know, you get an idea of what makes people like they are. I have a lot of respect for Barry. I don't have a lot of respect for the way he ran his program in Oklahoma necessarily, but I have a lot of respect for the person he is. He treated everybody the same. Doesn't matter if you were a janitor or the president of the United States. Barry treated you the same. So I have a lot of respect for somebody like that. The coaches since then have kind of run the gamut of all different types, and some good, some not so good. Bill Parcells, of course, kind of violated the thought that everyone figured there's no way that a good coach could ever want to come work for Jerry Jones. Well, he proved that was not so. And Bill actually got along with Jerry very well. And he got along with the media very well, even though he really didn't want to talk to us. I never had a one-on-one interview with Bill Parcells, which was unusual. That just didn't happen. But in the interviews he gave at the press conferences were so informational, and he was so good at telling you, this is why I do what I do. He was interesting, and a very interesting man, very thoughtful guy, and a great coach, no question. I think he kind of lost a little interest by the time he got to the Cowboys, and he needed some money, and that's one of the reasons why he took the job. But he was still a very interesting guy to cover and a fun guy to cover. Not so much with, Jason Garrett, a really good guy, a really fine man. I've seen all sides of Jason Garrett. He's not what he seems in those interviews, I can promise you that. He's not quite that boring. Close, but not quite that boring. He was, Jason is the kind of guy, we have, I don't know if the public's aware, we have what we call a walk-off. There's a press conference, and then the coach walks off, and as he walks off, the print media, not the television cameras, would walk off with him, and then you ask questions then, and then that's mostly on the record, some of it off the record, and we talk about what's going on. And Jason was much better, much looser and freer in his conversation in those situations.
But you mentioned Jason, that of course he was here, for 10 years or whatever it was in the position. So clearly, as you mentioned, everyone thought he was a great guy and a nice guy and everything else, but didn't really produce. And so, can you comment where he is now and how he's doing and the system he left?
Well, the thing about Jason, you have to remember, is that from Monday through Saturday, he's one of the best coaches in the NFL. Unfortunately, the NFL makes you play on Sundays mostly, and that was always the issue with Jason. And he's now the offensive coordinator of the New York Giants. There was a lot of question about would he survive that. I don't know if he was really Joe Judge's first choice. I think that was the owner kind of pressed that hire on them. So it'll be interesting to see how long that relationship lasts. He didn't have Saquon Barkley, who was a pretty big factor in that offense, and Daniel Jones still struggles a little bit, still needs to learn to kind of get rid of the ball and just throw it away if he has to. So I think that we'll see where he goes from there. Now, of course, that leads us now to the current occupant, Mike McCarthy. I thought that was a good hire when they made it. I'm a little less sure of that now than after 1 year. I think some of the decisions that were made, some of the things we criticized Jason Garrett for, the game time, game management, clock management, just decisions made during the course of the game, were things that frankly got him fired. I think we've seen some of those same things with Mike McCarthy, who took that year off to spend in the barn. And I think he maybe spent a little too much time in the barn. He's overthinking some of this stuff. Some of these decisions have been really questionable. And so I think it'll be interesting to see what he does now with the new defensive coordinator. Dan Quinn, who was the head coach of the Falcons, was fired. He's a highly respected guy, did a nice job in Seattle when he was a defensive coordinator there for 2 years. He's been a long time, though, as a defensive line coach as well. That's what he had done most of his career. And certainly that's one of the big problems for the Cowboys. And I don't think we can underrate that factor, the fact that maybe he can do something to fix this defensive line, which has been terrible. And that predates what they had this last year under Mike Nolan. The defensive line wasn't great the year before that either.
And the linebacker play had also regressed. And as we've all known, the secondary hasn't been good in years. So there are a lot of holes to fix for the Cowboys, and then they need to start in the draft. And fortunately for them, they got the 10th pick. I think they could probably end up with the best cornerback in the draft, whether that is Patrick Surtain from Alabama or Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech. Those two guys are considered the top 2 cornerbacks. That would be a nice get for the Cowboys to start there.
And that's the logical approach everyone outside of HQ with Jerry, that they would go for truly defensive players, obviously bringing Quinn in. Do you feel, just in your association with the team, and do you think that's truly what they're going to give Quinn the latitude in as far as decision in the draft room?
Well, I think one of the things you ask always about in the war room, as they call it, is that who's in charge here? Ever since Will McClay became in charge of the draft, the Cowboys draft had been far better. Actually, and I don't think most fans realize this, their drafts the last 10 years, certainly their first-round picks the last 10 years, have been better than in any other time in their history. Because if you go back, if you go by decades, the first 2 were Troy Aikman and Emmitt Smith. That's pretty good. Kind of hard to top 2 Hall of Famers.
That was a unique situation.
But that was a unique situation, and that's a different decade as well. After that, they made a habit of trading out of the first round, which was always a bad decision, almost always a bad decision. And there were a lot of busts in there. In this decade, they've actually succeeded fairly well. They had 7 first-round picks that were pretty good, at least pretty good. And some of them are close to Hall of Fame level, if you talk about Tyron Smith. Unfortunately, the busts have come on defense. When they drafted Taco Charlton, took him instead of T.J. Watt. Making those kind of picks have really hurt the Cowboys this decade. They almost always hit on the offensive players, whether that was offensive line or a C.D. Lamb. Those players have all come through for them very well. The ones they picked on defense, not so much. So they're going to have to really hit this time. I think that's one of the reasons why you see the defense struggle so much. They just don't have much talent back there, and they haven't taken it very seriously either.
The thought was let the Cowboys tank the rest of the season. They had that little streak at the end.
Yeah, I was all for tanking.
And I was all for tanking. And why don't you look at your quick return on your investment versus your long-term objectives? I mean that goes to a whole other question about the decisions being made about the Valley Ranch at HQ. But
I think this year the overriding factor was that the NFC East was there for the taking. I think if everyone else had been so bad, that the Cowboys would have been a little bit less resistant to the idea. Here's the deal. You don't want players playing halfway. You never want to ask a player to do less than 100%. What you're doing in those kind of situations, you're playing younger guys. You trade older players. You trade Aldon Smith. If that's what you're truly doing, is you're trying to maximize your young players and optimizing your return on your veteran players who at this point you don't feel like can help you. So the Cowboys decided though that they like Aldon Smith and they wanted to hold on to him, and they felt like that the NFC East was still winnable, which it was. Obviously going into the very last weekend, it's crazy that so many bad teams could be in one division. So I think that was part of the problem they got themselves into, was that. And so now where they go from there, the 10th pick, not a bad pick. The good thing for the Cowboys is could have been better. But the good thing for the Cowboys is it's going to be top heavy with offensive players. Yep. And frankly, they don't need any offensive players. And you need to always try to take the best player. That's what they did last year with C.D. Lamb. They needed defense last year as well. C.D. falls to them. You can't pass up that kind of talent. You never do that. Now, people would argue, well, what about Kyle Pitts, tight end from Florida, considered a real difference maker, could be one of the top 2 or 3 tight ends in the NFL. That's all well and good, but how many footballs are you going to play with? You've already got 3 big-time wide receivers. You're going to have Blake Jarvin coming back, who's a pretty good tight end. Dalton Schultz had a very nice year this year at tight end as well. This is an offense that already has a lot of things going for it. This defense needs some star potential. They need a top cornerback, and I think if they haven't had one in a long time. They made a mistake letting Byron Jones go. My personal opinion was they should have used the money they gave to Jalen Smith and given that to Byron Jones instead. I think he's a better cornerback than Jalen is a linebacker. Jalen gets a lot of tackles, but he gets a lot of tackles chasing people down. I once compared it to his defensive style is kicking down a door, jumping out a window, and chasing a perp down an alley. How about just squaring a guy up and tackling him? Sure. That's the problem with Jalen. He's rarely been in a position to make a stop at the line of scrimmage. And so how much of that is the defensive coordinator's fault? How much of that is Jalen's fault? We'll see. You know, I think the Cowboys are probably going to stick with Jalen. They could cut him loose and move on, but of course you'd have to have somebody to replace him, and at this point they don't have that.
Yeah, we definitely have some stars.
And Jeff, your mic.
Yeah, we definitely have some stars on the offense, or some supposed stars, because we could talk about, you know, Zeke. But we definitely need some stars on the defense, and of course the stars aren't typically chosen on the defensive side. So to me, that seems to be what's going to be the biggest issues. Speak to Dak's return from his injury, and also to Zeke and your comments on his performance this year.
Sure. You know, Dak had a horrific injury, and there have been a few guys to come back from injuries like that. A lot of times they haven't been the same. Joe Theismann had a horrific injury similar to that. He was never the same after that. Alex Smith had a similar injury. He came back. Actually, it was much worse for him because there were complications in the surgery to repair it. He almost died, frankly, and it's a miracle he's come back to play. Dak, from what I can tell and what I've seen of him, he walks without a limp. And that's pretty remarkable at this point. I remember when I was in high school, I broke my leg. I seemed like I limped for years after that, or at least that's what people told me. It's just hard to get that, you know, out of your system. And so I think that he will come back, and I think he'll be all right. The question is, what will they do with him contractually? You know, will they tag him again? Or will they give him a contract? I believe they will give him a long-term contract. I think they'll do it because I think that Dak will probably take less money now than he would have taken before. I think he probably figures that his market value is not as good as it was before he got hurt. And so I think that they'll come to an agreement. I think it'll be in the range of $35 million a year. And it'll be mostly guaranteed, probably 110, 115 million guaranteed. That's a lot of money, I know. Of course, the funny thing about it is, to me, is that there are a lot more bad contracts in baseball than there are in football. And those contracts in baseball are all guaranteed. In football, it was only recently where the money started getting guaranteed, and mostly just for quarterbacks. And so you can get out of these deals fairly easily most of the time if you want to. And as a matter of fact, Dak wanted to sign a 4-year deal, and the Cowboys wanted him to sign a 5-year deal. So Dak even wanted out before Jerry wanted him to do so. And a lot of that stems around the fact that with the new TV contracts that are coming up, the salary caps are expected to rise. Now, not this year. They'll go down this year. But next year and the year after and the year after that, the salary caps will go up, and you'll see players making a lot more, and everybody will be saying that $35 million is nothing for a quarterback.
Has Dak's agent been an impediment?
There was some thought that he was, but I don't think that was the case. That was an initial reports that was an issue with him. I don't think that's the case. You know, I think two things you need to remember are that Jerry likes Dak. He wants him to be his quarterback. Dak likes playing for the Cowboys. Both parties want to get this done. What Jerry has had a little trouble understanding is, why is Dak then being so tough in the negotiations? Well, Dak was really underpaid here for the first 4 years, right? From 4th-round draft pick, he was the biggest bargain in the NFL. Mm-hmm. No matter what you think about him as a quarterback, he was the biggest bargain in the NFL. And now he's trying to make up for lost time on that.
Yeah. So speak to the running backs, and of course, speak to the running backs, and also to Zeke. And of course, his $90 million contract, and what are we getting for that? And was it COVID related, and what do you think?
You know, I'll have to say, I have to back up on something here. You know, I write a column every year at the end of the year talking about the things I regret that I wrote that year. And one of the things I wrote back in, maybe I wrote this and maybe I didn't. I have to go back and check. I was all for the Cowboys with the 4th pick in 2016 drafting Jalen Ramsey, the defensive back. And then I finally came around at the very end and said, okay, they want to draft Zeke Elliott, that's fine. And that violated my own thoughts about, which are that you can find a really good running back in the draft every year. Every year you can find one. You don't have to take one in the 1st round. You can find them in the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th. Tony Pollard is an example of that, a 4th-round pick, been a very nice pickup for the Cowboys. And I think the mistake that you make is drafting a running back that high, it makes you believe that you have to re-sign them. You can't spend a fourth pick of the first round on a guy and keep him for 4 years. You better expect to keep him long term. So the Cowboys gave him another contract. I think what we've seen with Zeke since then is he's lost his explosiveness. He's not the same running back that he was in college and his first couple of years in the NFL. He just doesn't have the big burst of runs of 20 yards or more. He just doesn't do that anymore. Now he may get loose and do that, but it's not because he made it happen. I think we saw when Tony Pollard got to play, we get to see a running back who has a little bit of a burst, who hits the hole really hard and fast, and can squeeze through a crack and make something happen. Zeke is still a very powerful running back. He runs very hard. And he gets down by the goal line. He's very difficult to keep out. He's always moving forward. Those are all good things. Those are all things very reminiscent of Emmitt Smith. Same kind of running back from that standpoint. But I think that Jerry felt like that perhaps Zeke was another Emmitt Smith, and that's not the truth. That's not the same thing. So I don't think that the contract with Zeke was a good one. I think that in a couple of years, when there's an opt-out of there, I think the Cowboys would be very wise to do that and move on.
Yeah, exactly. Speak to the NFC East, or the NFC least, as you've heard it called a lot, and what's going to happen, you see Philadelphia and the changes being made there, and New York and such. But what do you think about that? Because again, it was a pretty deplorable conference.
Yes.
Division, yeah.
Yes, it is. And the really interesting thing is that now the Eagles are supposedly they are interested in Kellen Moore. Now, whether he's their first choice or not, I don't know. I would imagine what they look at this situation, Jeffrey Lurie looks at this situation and says, look, Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator of a team. The quarterback was Dak Prescott. Look at the improvements that Dak Prescott has made over the last 4 years. His chart is going up. You look at Carson Wentz's, his is going down. And then you look at Jalen Hurts. Here's a guy, not a very polished passer. In my mind, Jalen Hurts is not really a starting quarterback in the NFL. I don't believe it. I just don't believe he has enough arm talent. In the NFL, you have to really be able to throw the ball and not always just to a guy who's wide open. I see some of the same passing traits in Jalen that I saw in Vince Young. He can have some success because he's such a good athlete, and Jalen's a really smart guy too. He really wants to win. He's a winner. He's won wherever he's been. And those are all great traits. I just think once an NFL defense figures out what you can do, if there's only certain things you can do, and once they shut those down, then where do you go? You have to have several traits and then be able to adjust on the fly, and teams adjust to you and what you do best. So I think that the Eagles are going to struggle as they figure this out. I think that Carson Wentz has to be their quarterback. They've invested an awful lot of money in him. I think if he were to go, say, to Indianapolis and play for Frank Reich again, then I think you'd see Carson Wentz return to being the kind of quarterback everybody thought he was going to be. But until then, that's going to be very difficult. So I think the Eagles are going to continue to struggle a little bit. I think the Giants are going to be a little bit better. I like Joe Judge as a coach there. I think he has great attention to detail. It's going to be determined by the development of Daniel Jones. How well is he going to, how much is he going to improve? We saw a little improvement this year, but not nearly enough. I think he can do some things. He'll look a lot better with Saquon Barkley behind him, and he'll do a lot better if they get some more protection from that offensive line. It hasn't been very good for a long time there. I think the best team in the division, frankly, is Washington. Just got a quarterback problem. That's it. I love Ron Rivera. He's a terrific head coach, very well respected by his players. I think you saw when he was allowed to get rid of Dwayne Haskins, a guy that he just didn't believe in and that the team didn't believe in. He didn't work very hard, didn't take the job seriously, but that was a big investment to give up on a first-round draft pick, and they allowed him to do that. So that shows you the faith that Washington has in Ron Rivera. Sure. I think he's a really good coach, but they still got a quarterback problem. Is Alex Smith going to be able to stay healthy? I think right now he is the immediate answer at quarterback, but they're going to have to look for one. But they have a terrific defense. They got a lot of first-round draft picks they stocked up over there, especially in the defensive line. And same thing with the Giants. Giants have a terrific defense as well. The Cowboys have really got to keep up. They have potentially the best offense in the division and one of the best offenses in football. We saw that before Dak got hurt when they were putting up record numbers. The biggest problem was yes, there were turnovers. There's no question about that. But the problem was every time they turned it over, the defense just gave up a touchdown. Dak is putting up 35, 40 points a game, and the defense is putting up 45. So you can't live with that kind of defense. I think the Cowboys can bounce back. That's the NFL shows that you can do that. Their recent history shows that they did that. 1 year after going 4-12, they went 13-3. So I'm not saying they're going to be 13-3. I'm tired of having to write that column at the end of the year saying I was sorry for predicting them to do so well. I'm going to say 9-7 just to be safe here, and 9-7 may get it done in the NFC East.
Clearly we had some shining areas of the team. We had Pollard and CeeDee Lamb on the offense and Lawrence on the defense. But who are some that you would say that maybe don't get as much attention, but were some of the shining stars? And hopefully we'll get something in the draft, and we'll have some other questions from the audience too.
Not a lot of shining stars in that defense. I think Donovan Wilson had a really good year. The safety from A&M that they had drafted the year before came up, big hitter. So the guys on the defense really like him. They haven't had that from a safety, a Cowboy safety, since Roy Williams, frankly. And the position kind of outgrew Roy. He was really a great safety for a few years, and then everything changed in the NFL in the way what they required of safeties, and he was no longer as effective as he had been. So I do like Donovan Wilson back there. I think that's a good pickup there. I do like Trayvon Diggs very much, the cornerback from Alabama that they got in the second round. I think you could tell they were picking on him a lot this year, especially early in the year. But I liked what Mike McCarthy said about him. He said, I've never seen a young cornerback who reacts as well when the ball is in the air as Trayvon Diggs does. So that's saying a lot. He's seen a lot of football over the years. And what I liked about Trayvon, he was always around his guy. Now, sometimes they were still catching the ball, but at least he was in the neighborhood. Too many times with Cowboys defensive backs, we've watched them just, ole, and here goes the guy running past him. So I do think those two players are nice players. Obviously, DeMarcus Lawrence is still one of the top 5 defensive ends in the game. I know he doesn't get a lot of sacks. I think that's a lot of that problem is that there's not a lot of pressure coming from the other side. But DeMarcus is a great all-around defensive end. Very good against the run, very high motor. Pro Football Focus ranked him the 4th best defensive end in the league this year, which is pretty good considering what they have in front of them. Of course, the number 1 defensive end they had in the league, or at least edge rusher, was T.J. Watt. That's kind of a sore subject with Cowboys fans because the Cowboys drafted Taco Charlton instead of T.J. Watt. So they can't make those kind of mistakes anymore on defense. They have to make sure that when they have, in this draft in particular, with that 10th pick, they have to get a really good player. I think they'll take the cornerback. They still need a defensive tackle. This is not a draft heavy with defensive tackle talent. Usually with the 10th pick of the draft, you can find a really premier defensive tackle at that point. But they're hard to find. You're not going to get one in this draft, probably in the 2nd or 3rd round. I wouldn't be averse to them. They've got 9 picks in this draft. I wouldn't be averse if they used all 9 of them on defense. Sure. I think they need all the talent they can get, and certainly you don't want to pass up a guy who might be a Pro Bowl material. You never pass that kind of stuff up. But in those 2nd and 3rd rounds, you're probably looking at defensive players anyway.
I think we have some questions from the audience.
Thank you. Kevin, we have a few questions here. One is, let's switch from a football to a baseball.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about what you think the Rangers have this coming season.
Not much. Was that enough? No, I don't want to be ugly about the Rangers. I love baseball, and I've covered probably more baseball than anything else in my career. I think the Rangers have finally resigned themselves to the fact that they're rebuilding. And John Daniels never likes to use that word. I thought it was a really great move to pick up Chris Young as the GM. Chris, a Highland Park boy, a great guy. He went to Princeton and then pitched a long time in the big leagues, and then worked for MLB, and then now he's taken this job. And I think eventually he will end up being. He's the general manager, and he makes decisions, but John Daniels still has the last say. I think at some point that John will probably recede a little more into the background, and Chris will be in charge, and that's a good thing. But the problem for this team is that not enough top-end talent in the minor league system. Most of their best players are all down at the bottom, and that's really unfortunate, at least in the short term. Because so many times you think that's really good talent down there, and then you give it a couple of years and you realize, no, that wasn't. That was as far as those guys could go. So when someone tells you that your farm system is loaded at the bottom, don't always believe them. It doesn't always matter very much. But I expect that the Rangers will probably finish last again this season. That's sad. But it'll mean that they'll have a good draft pick, a good draft slot again. maybe they'll make the most of that. They haven't always done that either, especially under John Daniels.
Let's go a little bit broader. I know you've interviewed lots of athletes over the years. Does some come to mind that were really nice to interview, just really good, nice people? And then on the flip side, maybe who were some challenges?
More challenges than not. It's funny how you, because people always ask that question, and so it makes me think about it. I will say, in all the years that I've ever interviewed athletes, only one has ever bought me lunch, and that was Will Clark with the Rangers. When he was named, I went to interview him in New Orleans. That's where he lives, and he paid my lunch. Which, if you know most athletes, they're pretty cheap, and they're not picking up the tab. So I wouldn't say Will was the nicest guy though that I ever interviewed. There have been lots of guys who were really nice and different to interview. I can think of just recently, I talked to one of the real legends, Jerry West, in basketball, because I called him to ask about Luka Doncic, and Jerry West is one of the most respected talent evaluators in the history of basketball, along with being one of the greatest players in the history of basketball. And it was a real treat talking to Jerry. Maybe that's because he's a guy from my childhood that I remember well. And so those guys that you follow when you were a kid, you put them on a little higher pedestal than the ones now. I know when I first got to big papers and started interviewing superstar athletes, you were really disappointed more often than not by how they acted and their attitude in general. And then other times they were real characters. I once did a story on Shaquille O'Neal, and this was about the fact that a lot of people don't realize that Shaquille, his last couple years in high school, his father was in the military, so he was in San Antonio. And so they played for the state championship 2 years in a row. They lost his junior year to a little team called Liberty Hill, which is in the hill country in Texas. Not a guy on the team taller than 6'2", and meanwhile they beat this team that had this 7-foot behemoth on it. And so I approached, Shaq would talk about that periodically. That was one of his biggest regrets, that he had lost this game in high school. So I approached him with this idea of doing this story, and he was all for it. And I went and talked to the starters on that Liberty Hill team and found them, and then I rounded them all up and took them to a game in San Antonio when Shaq was there and got his picture taken with him. And so he walks up to him with this really foreboding look on his face, and he's kind of muttering under his breath. And these guys were all very nervous. And he gets them all, and of course his wingspan is humongous, and he gets them all out and pulls them all in, and he's muttering the whole time they're taking the pictures, but he's got this huge smile on his face. He's a lot of fun. I love Shaq, and so he'd rank up there as one of my favorites.
Let's switch to basketball.
Oh, yeah. Speak to Luka Doncic, obviously.
Luka Doncic, I have a kind of a soft spot for Donnie Nelson, the general manager of the Mavericks. A really good guy to deal with. I try not to let that interfere with my judgment too much when I like the guy. But Donnie's identified two of the greatest players ever to play in the game. One of them, Dirk Nowitzki. He was high on Dirk and wanted him when he wouldn't have been the 9th pick of the draft. The Mavericks drafted somebody else, and they traded to get Dirk in that same draft. Same thing they did with Luka Doncic, And I think that, as Jerry West told me, that Luka Doncic, he made this judgment already, is going to be a better player than Dirk Nowitzki was. And I agree with that. I think if he's just 21, and a lot of things can go wrong, he needs to get in better shape. He needs to take that seriously. He needs to really work on his body and getting himself in shape, making himself stronger. He's very strong now, but his durability, his endurance is probably not as good as it should be for somebody who's 21 years old. And I think he'll learn that. He needs to get better at his free throw shooting. He needs to get better at his shot selection a little bit. And he still dribbles a little too much sometimes. But having said all that, I've seen talked to too many people who tell me that he's going to be one of the greatest players of all time. And because of all the things he can do, because of his size, because of his court vision and awareness, all of those kind of things are remarkable for somebody his age. And what people like about that too, people like Jerry West, is that, and the ball always goes through him. People You know, because one of the other people that Donnie Nelson wanted the Mavericks to draft was Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Greek freak. Mark Cuban said no. So they could have had him too. Of course, if they'd gotten him, they wouldn't have ended up with Luka Doncic. It wouldn't have been a bad team. You'd have been a great team with the Greek freak. So having said that, would you rather have the Greek freak or would you rather have Luka Doncic? Well, one guy's an unbelievable athletic marvel, but the ball doesn't go through him. You know, he's not bringing the ball up the floor. He's not making decisions. He has to wait for somebody to get him the ball. Now, he's awfully good when he gets it, but in the long run, to me, I'd rather have a ball going through that person. Bill Russell was a great center, but when people talk about the greatest players of all time, they talk about Magic Johnson. You know, they talk about Michael Jordan, they talk about LeBron James. These are guys who mainly have the ball in their hands all the time. You know, it makes it a little more difficult to be great when someone has to get the ball to you. So I do think that Luka is going to be really good. I do think he has, the thing I like best about him probably is that above all else, he wants to win. I've been in the locker room, and when we could go in the locker room, I've been in the locker rooms and seen him after games when he's had a great game and they've lost, and you would think that someone had stolen his dog. You know, he looks like this is killing him to lose this game. He hates losing, and that's what you want from your best player. You do not want a player you invest a lot of money and resources in who's just okay with winning or losing. You know, it has to be something that eats at them. You know, they have to, basically, it's at best, and these types of players are not so well adjusted. You know, you want them to be people that winning means everything to them.
Sure. You know, speaking of Donnie Nelson, he's obviously found those players in Eastern Europe and such, and obviously Eastern Europe has a long history of basketball. But why is it, or why have people, maybe not the right word, taken some time to look into those resources out there, such as we've gotten to now in some time?
I think there's a little bit of prejudice against those players from the standpoint they're considered soft. You know, Dirk is a lot tougher than he seems or seemed, and an unbelievable human being, but a little soft early in his, certainly early part of his career, and I think that there was concern about Luka being the same way. I never thought that about Luka from the standpoint of the guy's been playing against men since he was 14 years old, you know. And if you look at the NBA, or at least look at college basketball players now, most of the best ones are freshmen, and then they move on. So what kind of talent are you really playing against in college basketball in America? Not as good as they're playing against in Europe, where they're playing against 35-year-old men. I mean, I just feel like that was, I think that Luka is going to start to reverse that trend a little bit. Now, I will say this, you know, the Mavericks have now had the two greatest players ever to come out of Europe, you know. So that's the results are a little skewed in the Mavericks' favor. They have spent a lot of they've invested a lot of money in scouting over there, and they've drafted a lot of guys from over there. But a lot of times, the reason they drafted those guys, they know they're not going to make it. They're just trying to make nice with those people in Europe and all the people who might have an influence on any of these decisions made by any of these players. And they played that game very well. They need to play a little bit better in college basketball here, but they play the European game better than anybody.
Is Kristaps going to be the Leighton Vander Esch of the Mavericks?
I hope not. You know, he's a tremendously talented guy. To be that tall and to be able to move like he does, and it's just amazing to me. I just grew up in an era covering college basketball and where big guys just couldn't do anything. You know, I can remember there was a player at TCU who shot 18% from the free throw line. 18%. Nick the Brick Cuccinella. I'll never forget that name. But at any rate, I think that what you'll have to get adjusted to, and just face it, it's just going to be a case of when the NBA gets back to playing 82 games a year, he's going to play 65. If you get 60, 65 games out of him a year, you're doing well. But what it means is that you're going to need a third wheel. Is Josh Richardson that third wheel for the Mavericks? We'll see. He's been okay so far. One of the things that Josh has brought them, though, and what also KP brings them, is that they're a much better defensive team so far than they were last year. Much better. They're like the second or third ranked defensive team in the league. They were awful defensively last year. So that's a big improvement, and that's what they need. But if you've got a third guy who you can really count on as a scorer, and I don't really count Tim Hardaway as that guy. I don't think he can do that night after night. He does occasionally. I think he's a great sixth man, but he's too expensive for that role. And I don't expect he'll be with the Mavericks next year. But they need that third wheel still.
Okay. We have another question from the audience.
Okay, we're going to bring it back to football.
Okay.
Let's talk Super Bowl.
Okay.
Prediction.
Oh, I don't know how you can't go with the Chiefs, right? Like Patrick Mahomes. That's a great story, the development of Patrick Mahomes. And here's a guy that when he was in high school at White House was a three-star recruit, and now he's considered he might end up being maybe the best quarterback in the history of the NFL. How does that happen? I think what it tells you about Cliff Kingsbury, who was the coach that recruited him at Texas Tech. And had Baker Mayfield as well. And then when he went to the Cardinals, told them, I want Kyler Murray. When Cliff Kingsbury believes in a quarterback, he's a quarterback. And I think that Babe Laufenberg and I used to have this discussion that what the Cowboys needed to do was to hire somebody whose only job was to find and develop quarterbacks. And I said, I would pay Cliff Kingsbury whatever he wanted to do that because he clearly understands the position better than anybody else. Mm-hmm. Not a great head coach, excuse me, maybe he'll be better in the NFL than he was in college, but he's certainly great at identifying that. And coming out of the NFC, I tell you, I'm not even sure at this point how I feel about that. I think the Rams' defense is so good they may be able to ride that. So let me go with the Rams. I'll say the Rams and the Chiefs.
Well, Kevin, we appreciate it. I think we're getting close to our closing of our today's meeting, but we thank you very, very much for being here truly in these times. And in honor of your presence here, we're going to have a book presented to Preston Hollow Elementary in your name.
Nice.
And then at this moment, I think we will close it by, one more announcement real quick, please.
Hello, I'm back. I'm almost back. How about right here? This is crazy. We are going to replay the new member speech from earlier. I understand we had some audio problems, and sorry about that. But we're going to go ahead and let Jeff close the meeting. Well, actually, let's replay that, and then we'll close the meeting. There we go. Thank you, Kevin.
Hi there, I am Eric Harrison. I was actually born and raised in Dallas, grew up in the Carrollton Farmers Branch area, graduated from R.L. Turner High School a few years ago. Proud graduate of the University of Oklahoma and have been a season ticket holder since the year I graduated, so I don't miss many games there. My wife Jennifer and I have been married for 31 years plus. We have 3 grown children. My oldest son is 24. He just shipped out to go to Florence, Italy for a year on a graduate art history program. So it's good to be my oldest son for sure. I also have a 22-year-old son and a 21-year-old daughter who is at SMU. I spent my entire career working in my family business, which was a wholesale women's shoe company based here in Carrollton, J. Renee Shoes, for some of you ladies that may be shoeaholics and have heard of us. We are still a family-owned and operated local company, but I decided at the beginning of 2019 that I was ready to do something else, and really just not having any idea what I was doing or why. It just seemed like the right thing to do. So I met with my brother, who was my business partner, and we had a very amicable split. He bought me out, and since then, at that time, the first thing I did is I wrote and self-published my first book called Mustard Seed Faith, which is available on Amazon if you're so inclined. I also do a fair bit of speaking, both online mostly at this point and to groups. So I certainly am comfortable on the stage. And the primary focus of what I'm doing right now is coaching. May of last year, I became a licensed certified Ziegler coaching system coach. So I am taking the principles and wisdom for almost 50 years that the Ziegler Corporation has been imparting to millions of people all over the world. And I work one-on-one or in small groups with people to just help them really discover, what their dreams and goals are and where they are now and how to bridge the gap from where they are to where they want to go. And so specifically, I work with a lot of, actually, as it turns out, business owners, since I was one myself, but I also work with people who are up and coming and looking to advance their careers. So I have taken on somewhat of a mentor role, and that's really what led me to the Rotary Club, is just the whole thing of service. I just want to serve in this, second phase of my life, as it were. I just want to get involved in Rotary. I want to be involved in some of the projects that you're doing. I'm especially interested in the Bonton project we have going on. I'm especially interested in the leadership program that I think you offer, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot more. The only thing I have to learn is what I don't know right now, which is a lot more than what I do know. But I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to meet all of you, and I can't wait till we can all get together again in person and break bread together. But I'm excited to be part of the Park Cities Rotary Club. I specifically sought you out because I wanted the most active, most involved, most energetic group, and I believe I found that with you. So look forward to meeting you soon. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, members and guests. We had a great program today. I hope to see you back here next week at noon on Friday, and we'll talk more baseball. We'll hear all about the Rangers. Thank you, and everyone have a wonderful meeting. This concludes our meeting.